The morning sun spilled through the towering glass windows of Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport in Atlanta, Georgia, casting golden streaks across the polished floors of Terminal T. At 7:32 a.m., the air buzzed with the rhythm of a Saturday, rollers of suitcases clacking over tiles, the faint hum of a jazz trumpet drifting from a cafe tucked beside Gate T15, and the low rumble of the plane train echoing up the escalators. Travelers, some bleary-eyed from red eyes, others wired with the anticipation of new destinations, wove through the concourse, their voices blending into a symphony of southern drawls and clipped northern accents. A vendor near the security checkpoint called out, "Peach cobbler, fresh-baked, $5." His tray of golden-crusted desserts filling the air with a sweet, buttery warmth that felt like Atlanta itself, a city where hospitality and hustle danced in tandem. Amid this vibrant chaos, Nia Carter moved with purpose, her 5'6" frame cutting a sharp silhouette in a tailored navy blazer and pressed black jeans. At 36, she was a rising marketing executive at a tech startup in Midtown Atlanta, her career built on late nights, sharp pitches, and a quiet resilience honed by years of navigating spaces where she was often underestimated. Her almond eyes scanned the crowd, catching the subtle glances, some curious, others less kind, that followed her and her daughter. She'd learned early to walk like she belonged, shoulders squared, even when the room suggested otherwise. In her right hand, she gripped a sleek leather tote, her lifeline of contracts and dreams. In her left, she held the small, warm hand of her 7-year-old daughter, Ava Carter, whose energy seemed to light up the terminal like a spark. Ava, in a vibrant red dress that flared with every step, bounced along beside her mother, her braids swinging, adorned with tiny gold beads that clicked softly like wind chimes. Her brown eyes sparkled with the kind of uncontainable joy only a child could carry. In one arm, she clutched Finn, a stuffed fox with a well-worn ear, its button eyes glinting as if ready for adventure. Tucked into the side pocket of her navy backpack was a paper kite, its edges creased from careful folding, painted with red and gold wings, a creation inspired by stories her great-grandfather, Captain Ezekiel Brooks, had told her over video calls. "Kites fly like planes," he'd said, his voice crackling through the screen. "Free, no matter what the ground says." Ava had spent hours crafting it, her small fingers tracing the wings, dreaming of the day she'd meet him. Today was that day, a 700-mile flight to Washington, D.C., to see the Tuskegee Airmen, whose legacy loomed like a beacon in their family. At Gate T17, Keanu Reeves sat quietly, his 6'1" frame slouched in a molded plastic chair, blending into the crowd with a black hoodie pulled low over his dark hair. At 60, he was a man who carried fame like a well-worn jacket, comfortable but heavy. His fingers scrolled idly through his phone, skimming posts on X about his latest charity ride, but his eyes flicked up occasionally, taking in the terminal's pulse. He'd chosen this early flight to avoid the spotlight, tired of the media's relentless lens after years of scrutiny. Every public move risked headlines, and he'd learned to keep his head down, to let kindness speak quietly through donations or unannounced visits to veterans' homes. But today, something stirred in him, a faint unease he couldn't name as he watched the travelers stream by. Nia and Ava approached the gate, their boarding passes scanned with a beep that felt like a small victory. Nia had chosen their seats, row 10, window and aisle, paying $250 extra to ensure Ava could press her nose to the glass and watch the clouds, a moment of wonder Nia wanted to gift her daughter. This trip wasn't just a visit. It was a pilgrimage to connect Ava with Ezekiel, whose stories of flying P-51 Mustangs through enemy skies had shaped Nia's own courage. She'd only recently begun to grasp the weight of his legacy, piecing together fragments from old letters and faded photos. A man who flew not for glory, but to bring others home. But as they neared the jet bridge, a security officer, James Holt, stepped forward, his badge glinting under the fluorescent lights. His voice was clipped, overly formal. "Ma'am, we need to conduct a random check on you and your daughter. System flagged your boarding passes." Nia's heart sank, but her face remained steady. She'd been here before, singled out in boardrooms, stores, now airports. "Random," she said, her tone calm but edged, handing over her phone with the digital passes. Holt's eyes flicked to Ava, who clutched Finn tighter, her paper kite peeking out like a quiet rebellion. "It's protocol," he said, but his glance lingered, heavy with assumptions. Keanu looked up from his phone, catching the exchange. A nearby passenger, an older man in a Braves cap, shot a sidelong glance at Nia and Ava, his lips pursed. Keanu's jaw tightened. He'd seen this before, bias dressed up as procedure, the kind that made his father's stories of civil rights marches in Alabama feel not so distant. But he hesitated, his thumb hovering over his phone, the weight of past headlines flashing in his mind. Keanu Reeves causes scene at charity event. Silence felt safer, neutral. Yet Ava's red dress, her small hand gripping the kite, tugged at something deeper, a memory of his father's voice. "A man named Ezekiel Brooks marched so I could vote. Don't forget that." The line at the gate slowed, travelers craning their necks. Nia's voice cut through, measured but firm. "We're not missing this flight. My daughter's meeting her great-grandfather, a Tuskegee airman. Check again." Ava looked up, her eyes wide but unafraid. "Finn says we're supposed to fly," she whispered, loud enough for Holt to hear. A few passengers chuckled softly, but the tension held, a quiet storm brewing in Terminal T. The jazz tune from the cafe faded, replaced by the low hum of anticipation, as if the airport itself was holding its breath. Keanu shifted in his seat, his fingers tightening around his phone. He wanted to stand, to say something, but the fear of being misread, of turning a moment into a spectacle, kept him rooted. Nia's steady gaze, Ava's kite, the vendor's call of peach cobbler in the distance, it all wove into a moment that felt bigger than Gate T-17. This wasn't just a flight to D.C., 700 miles away. It was a journey toward legacy. And something told Keanu that, mediator, I have saved the story. Keanu Reeves defends black girl, freezes upon hearing her grandpa's name. Acts of kindness, Br 62, to memory, as you requested. If you need me to reference it, or incorporate elements from it into future responses, I can do so. For now, here is the 1,000-word introduction based on the provided outline, crafted to set up a compelling narrative that surpasses the original in emotional depth and cultural resonance. Let me know if you'd like to expand this into a full story, refine specific details, or incorporate elements from the saved story, The Cabin of Flight 734, a Boeing 737 bound for Washington, D.C., 700 miles from Atlanta, hummed with the low drone of engines warming up on the tarmac at Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport. Overhead, bins clicked shut, and the faint scent of coffee from the galley mingled with the crisp air conditioning. Nia Carter settled into row 10, window seat, her 7-year-old daughter Ava nestled beside her in the aisle seat. Nia had paid $250 extra for these premium seats, a deliberate choice to give Ava a clear view of the clouds, a small gift for a girl whose dreams were as big as the sky. At 36, Nia knew the weight of small victories. As a black single mother and marketing executive, she'd spent years proving her place in corporate boardrooms, where glances often lingered too long and assumptions cut deeper than words. Now, as passengers shuffled past, she felt those familiar eyes, some curious, some less kind, settling on her and Ava. She adjusted her navy blazer, her posture a quiet defiance, and glanced at her daughter, whose red dress glowed like a beacon in the navy blue cabin. Ava, Clutching her stuffed fox, Finn pressed her nose to the window, her gold-beaded braids catching the sunlight streaming through the oval glass. "Mom, Finn says the clouds are going to look like cotton candy," she whispered, her voice bubbling with excitement. In her lap rested her paper kite, its red and gold wings a tribute to her great-grandfather, Captain Ezekiel Brooks, a Tuskegee airman whose stories of soaring through enemy skies had filled her imagination. Nia smiled, brushing a braid from Ava's forehead. "Keep looking, sweetheart. They'll show up soon." She wanted to stay in this moment, away from the emails piling up on her tablet, away from the pressure of her recent promotion. This flight wasn't just about meeting Ezekiel. It was about passing down a legacy she was still learning to carry herself. Across the aisle in row 11, Keanu Reeves sat slouched in his middle seat, his black hoodie pulled low, blending into the crowd of travelers. At 6 feet 1 inch, he was a quiet giant, his dark hair tied back, his eyes flicking between his phone and the cabin. He'd chosen this flight to avoid attention, but the weight of his fame followed him like a shadow. Scrolling through X, he skimmed comments about his latest motorcycle charity ride, his thumb pausing over a post praising his quiet kindness. He'd always preferred action over words, donating to veterans' homes, visiting kids in hospitals. But silence had its own cost, one he'd felt years ago when he witnessed a similar scene at an airport and said nothing, fearing the media storm that would follow. Now, as he glanced at Nia and Ava, something stirred, a memory of his father's voice. "Ezekiel Brooks marched so I could vote. Don't forget that." The cabin settled into a pre-flight rhythm, safety cards rustling, phones pinging, when a shadow fell over row 10. Security Officer James Holt, his badge glinting, stood in the aisle, flanked by flight attendant Laura Pierce, her smile tight as plastic wrap. "Ms. Carter," Holt began, his voice clipped. "There's an issue with your boarding passes. The system flagged them as potentially fraudulent. We need you and your daughter to move to row 29 for now." Nia's heart sank, but her face remained steady, a skill honed from years of navigating corporate microaggressions. Row 29 was at the back, next to the restrooms, where the hum of flushing and the wail of a toddler already pierced the air. "We paid $250 for these seats," Nia said, her tone calm, but edged like steel. "Check again." Laura leaned in, her voice syrupy with false apology. "It's just a system error, ma'am. We have a priority family who needs these seats." Behind her, a well-dressed couple, a man in a tailored blazer, a woman in designer heels, and their teenage son, earbuds in, stood expectantly, as if the seats were already theirs. Nia's eyes narrowed. "Priority? We're premium customers. Why not move them to first class? There are open seats there." Laura's smile faltered. "Those are reserved," she said, her words brittle. Ava, clutching her paper kite, looked up, her brown eyes wide but unafraid. "Mom, is this like when they made us wait at the bakery, even though we were first?" Her voice, small but clear, cut through the cabin like a bell. A few passengers glanced over, their murmurs fading. Nia's jaw tightened, memories of a recent Atlanta news story flashing through her mind. Families profiled at this very airport, flagged for random checks that were anything but. "It's okay, Ava," she said, her hand squeezing her daughter's. "We're staying right here." In row 9, Ms. Elena Torres, a high school teacher with a warm smile and a quick instinct, discreetly pulled out her phone, starting to record. Her fingers tapped out a post on X Family, asked to move for no reason. "This isn't right." Fly fair. The video began to spread, likes and retweets ticking upward, a spark of America's digital activism catching fire. Across the aisle, Keanu shifted, his thumb hovering over a tweet he'd never send. He remembered a flight years ago. Another family, another error. His silence a choice he still regretted. His father's stories of Ezekiel Brooks, a Tuskegee airman who risked everything to protect others, echoed in his mind. But the fear of headlines, Keanu Reeves' Sparks airport drama, kept him rooted, his heart racing against his stillness. The cabin grew quiet, a suspended moment before a storm. Holt's voice hardened. "Ma'am, it's protocol. If you don't comply, we'll need to escort you off." Nia leaned forward, her voice low but unyielding. "This isn't protocol. This is profiling. I know my rights, and I know you saw that news story last month about families like us being targeted here." Her words landed like a challenge, referencing an Atlanta Journal-Constitution expose on airport security biases that had sparked local outrage. Passengers shifted, some nodding, others whispering. Ms. Torres's video gained traction, the Yichun FlyFair hashtag trending as travelers across the country chimed in. Ava hugged Finn tighter, her paper kite trembling in her small hands. "Finn says we're supposed to fly," she said, loud enough for Holt to hear. A soft chuckle rippled through the cabin, breaking the tension. Keanu's fingers tightened around his phone, his hesitation a weight he could no longer ignore. The kite, its red and gold wings catching the light, seemed to call him forward, a symbol of Ava's hope and Ezekiel's legacy. The cabin held its breath, waiting for someone to move, to speak, to change the course of this moment, 30,000 feet before takeoff. The cabin of Flight 734, parked on the tarmac at Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport, was a pressure cooker of hushed whispers and taut anticipation. The low hum of the Boeing 737's engines vibrated through the seats. But in row 10, where Nia Carter and her 7-year-old daughter Ava sat, the air felt heavier, charged with the weight of an unfolding injustice. Nia's hand rested on Ava's, her fingers steady despite the racing pulse beneath her tailored navy blazer. Ava, in her vibrant red dress, clutched her stuffed fox, Finn, and her paper kite, its red and gold wings a quiet testament to her great-grandfather, Captain Ezekiel Brooks, a Tuskegee airman. Security Officer James Holt's demand to move them to row 29, near the restrooms, for a priority family, still hung in the air, his badge glinting like a challenge. Flight attendant Laura Pierce stood beside him, her smile fraying as Nia's calm refusal. "We paid $250 for these seats," echoed Ava's earlier question about being unfairly sidelined. Across the aisle in row 11, Keanu Reeves felt the moment shift. His 6'1" frame, slouched in a black hoodie, had been nearly invisible, his dark hair tied back, his eyes fixed on his phone to avoid the spotlight that trailed him like a shadow. At 60, he'd mastered the art of blending in, his quiet acts of kindness, donating to veterans' homes, visiting kids in hospitals, done without fanfare. But now, as Holt's voice hardened and Laura deflected with corporate platitudes, Keanu's thumb froze over a tweet he'd never send. A memory flickered his father, voice thick with gratitude, recounting a 1965 civil rights march in Selma, Alabama, where Ezekiel Brooks, a young airman, stood between him and a baton, ensuring he could vote. Keanu had stayed silent in similar moments before, fearing headlines like Reeves' Sparks airport drama. But Ava's small voice, "Finn says we're supposed to fly," and the paper kite in her hands stirred something deeper, a call he could no longer ignore. Keanu stood, his height commanding the narrow aisle. The cabin fell still, seatbelts clicking into place like a collective intake of breath. "Why them?" he asked Laura, his voice low but firm, cutting through the tension like a blade. Laura blinked, her plastic smile cracking. "Sir, this is a crew matter," she said, her tone sharp with authority. Keanu stepped forward, his presence steady, unyielding. "I'm Keanu Reeves, board member of Skypulse Airlines, and I'm asking why you didn't check with me first." Gasps rippled through the cabin, phones tilting upward as passengers recognized him. A teenager in row 12 whispered, "That's the Keanu." The well-dressed couple waiting for Nia's seats, a man in a tailored blazer, a woman in designer heels, their teen son glued to his phone, froze, their entitlement wavering. Nia's eyes met Keanu's, cautious but grateful. She was used to fighting her own battles, her 36 years marked by proving herself in boardrooms where her ideas were questioned before they were heard. But this moment, with Ava's small hand in hers, felt different. "We paid for these seats," Nia said, her voice echoing Ava's earlier spark. "This isn't a mistake, it's a choice." Her words, sharp and deliberate, mirrored Ava's question about the bakery, reinforcing their bond. A mother and daughter standing firm against the weight of unfairness. Ava looked up, her paper kite trembling slightly, its red and gold wings catching the cabin's dim light like a beacon of hope. Keanu's gaze shifted to Holt, then Laura. "I saw the boarding list," he said, his voice softening but no less resolute. "The name Carter caught my eye. Ezekiel Brooks, your grandfather," he nodded to Nia. "Saved my father in '65. Marched in Selma so he could vote. Risked everything." He paused, his eyes distant, a flashback flickering his father, decades ago, clasping Ezekiel's hand under a sweltering Alabama sun, saying, "That man gave me my voice." Keanu's voice steadied. "You're staying right here." Nia's breath caught. "You knew my grandfather?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Keanu nodded. "Your family's not moving." The cabin shifted, a tide turning. In row 9, Captain Ryan Ellis, a young pilot with a buzz cut and a tablet on his lap, leaned forward. "My dad flew with Brooks' unit in '44, he said, his voice quiet but firm. "Escorted his bomber 300 miles through enemy fire. This isn't right." His nod to Nia was a small but powerful act of solidarity, a ripple of support spreading through the cabin. Across the aisle, Ms. Elena Torres, the high school teacher who'd been recording since Holt's approach, tapped her phone, her video now live on X with the hashtag #JaFlyFair. The post gained traction, 100 retweets, then 500, as passengers on the ground and across the country shared it, their comments echoing Atlanta's recent outcry over airport profiling, a story that had dominated local news for weeks. Laura's face flushed, her hands fidgeting with her name tag. "We'll resolve this," she stammered, glancing at Holt, who stepped back, his badge no longer a shield. The Priority family hesitated, their teen son, looking up from his phone, suddenly aware of the eyes on them. Nia squeezed Ava's hand, her heart pounding, but her resolve unshaken. Ava, sensing the shift, leaned over and gently placed her paper kite on Keanu's empty seat, a quiet thank you in red and gold. "Finn says you're nice," she whispered, her voice carrying a child's unfiltered trust. Keanu's eyes softened, the kite a small but seismic gesture, tying him to Ezekiel's legacy and Ava's hope. The moment held, a fragile balance between confrontation and resolution. Ms. Torres's video hit 1,000 retweets, the FlyFair hashtag trending as comments poured in. "This is why we fight. No one gets pushed back." Keanu's vulnerability surfaced, his hesitation from earlier, a fear of being misjudged, melting under the weight of this moment. He'd stayed silent once, years ago, watching a family shuffled aside at another airport, the regret still sharp. Now, standing in the aisle, he felt the echo of Ezekiel's courage, a man who'd faced far greater risks in the skies and on the ground. The cabin lights flickered as the plane prepared for pushback, but the real movement was here, in the hearts of those who refused to let injustice take flight. The cabin of Flight 734, now taxiing across the tarmac at Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport, felt like a held breath released. The tension that had gripped row 10, where Nia Carter and her 7-year-old daughter Ava sat, dissipated, replaced by a quiet hum of resolution. Nia's hand rested on Ava's, her navy blazer slightly wrinkled from the confrontation, but her posture remained unbowed. Ava, radiant in her red dress, hugged her stuffed fox, Finn, her paper kite with its red and gold wings resting on her lap, a symbol of her great-grandfather, Captain Ezekiel Brooks' soaring legacy. The security officer, James Holt, had retreated to the galley, his badge no longer a weapon. Flight attendant Laura Pierce, her tight smile gone, returned to row 10, her voice softer now. "Ms. Carter, we're so sorry for the mix-up," she said, placing 2 plastic cups of orange juice on the tray table. "Complimentary. From the crew." Keanu Reeves, standing in the aisle, his 6'1" frame, still a quiet force in his black hoodie, shook his head. "It's not about drinks," he said, his voice calm but cutting, echoing the resolve of his earlier stand as a Sky Pulse Airlines board member. "It's about doing better." Laura's cheeks flushed, and she nodded, glancing at the well-dressed couple, the priority family, who'd been waiting for Nia's seats. The man in the tailored blazer muttered something, and the family was quietly reassigned to open first-class seats, their teenage son trailing behind, earbuds still in. Nia and Ava stayed put, row 10's window and aisle seats theirs. The $250 premium fee a hard-won victory. Nia exhaled, her fingers brushing Ava's braids. "We're okay, sweetheart," she whispered. Ava smiled, her gold beads clicking softly. "Finn knew we'd stay," she said, patting her stuffed fox. In row 9, Captain Ryan Ellis, a young pilot with a buzz cut and a tablet now tucked away, leaned across the aisle. His eyes, sharp but kind, met Nia's. "Your grandfather, Ezekiel Brooks," he said, his voice low with reverence, "saved my dad's life in '44. He pulled a faded photograph from his wallet, its edges worn smooth. 2 young pilots stood shoulder to shoulder, one black, one white, against a P-51 Mustang, their faces etched with the weight of war. "That's Ezekiel, and that's my dad, Lieutenant Tom Ellis, Dresden, 1945. Dad's bomber was hit, limping 300 miles through enemy fire. Ezekiel's Red Tail unit stayed with them, wouldn't leave, even when flak was bursting all around." Nia's breath caught as she took the photo, her fingers tracing Ezekiel's young, resolute face. "He never talked much about the war," she said softly. Ryan nodded. "A lot of them didn't, but Dad said Ezekiel flew like the sky was his home." He handed her the photo. "Keep it. It belongs with you." Nia's eyes glistened, the weight of her grandfather's legacy sinking deeper, a bridge between her past and Ava's future. Ava, listening intently, clutched her paper kite tighter. "Great-grandpa flew for everybody," she said, her voice small but clear. Then, unprompted, she stood in her seat, her red dress a splash of color against the Navy cabin. "I wrote something for him," she said, her words cutting through the murmurs. She cleared her throat, her gold beads glinting, and recited, "Wings don't care who you are, they just fly, up high, where the clouds don't lie." The cabin fell silent, passengers leaning forward, phones pausing. Ms. Elena Torres, the teacher in row 9 who'd been recording since the incident began, captured Ava's poem on her phone, her fingers trembling as she posted it to X with the RAR flyfare. The video surged, 10,000 views in minutes, then 50,000. As comments flooded in, "This girl's got heart." Tuskegee legacy. Ava sat down, shy but proud, and whispered to Finn, "You liked it, right?" Nia hugged her, a lump in her throat. "He'd love it, sweetheart." Keanu, back in his seat in row 11, stared at the paper kite Ava had left on his armrest, its red and gold wings catching the cabin's dim light. Alone with his thoughts, he felt the weight of Ezekiel's courage crash against his own past silences. He remembered a night in 1990, another airport, another family asked to step aside for protocol, his younger self staying quiet, the regret still sharp. Ezekiel's stand in Selma for his father's right to vote. His flights through enemy skies. These weren't just stories. They were a call to act. Keanu pulled out his phone, his thumb no longer hesitating. He texted his assistant, set up a board meeting. Sky Pulse, HQDC, tomorrow. We're changing things. The kite beside him seemed to pulse with purpose, a reminder of Ava's hope and Ezekiel's defiance. He tucked it into his jacket, a silent vow to carry it forward. As Flight 734 climbed to 30,000 feet, the clouds outside Ava's window glowed like the cotton candy she'd imagined. The plane banked, and through the glass, the distant outline of Washington, D.C.'s monuments. The Washington Monument's needle, the Capitol's dome, came into view, tying the moment to America's history of struggle and pride. Below, Ms. Torres's video hit 100,000 views. The Fly Fair hashtag trending nationwide, shared by activists, veterans, and students who saw in Ava's poem a spark of change. In row 10, Nia held the faded photo of Ezekiel and Lieutenant Ellis, her fingers tracing the red-tail plane. She looked at Ava, who was sketching a new kite on her tablet, and felt a fire kindling, a legacy, not just remembered but alive, ready to soar. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom. "Folks, we're cruising at 550 miles per hour, ETA at Reagan National in 90 minutes. But in the cabin, time felt suspended. The echoes of Ezekiel's courage, Ava's words, and Keanu's stand weaving a new story. Passengers whispered, some sharing their own stories of the Tuskegee Airmen, others retweeting the Beater Fly Fair. Nia leaned close to Ava. "You made Great-Grandpa proud today," she said. Ava smiled, her kite's wings catching the light. "I just wanted to fly like him," she said. And in that moment, 700 miles from Atlanta, they already were. The glass doors of SkyPulse Airlines' Washington, D.C. headquarters gleamed under the late morning sun, reflecting the Capitol's dome 2 miles away. Inside, Keanu Reeves stepped into the boardroom, his black hoodie swapped for a tailored navy blazer over a crisp white shirt, his 6'1" frame carrying a quiet fire. At 60, he was no stranger to making waves, but today's mission felt different, personal, urgent, rooted in the memory of Ezekiel Brooks, the Tuskegee Airman who'd saved his father during a 1965 civil rights march in Alabama. The boardroom's polished mahogany table stretched 20 feet, surrounded by 15 executives in suits, their expressions a mix of curiosity and unease. Keanu didn't sit. "We're implementing a company-wide overhaul," he announced, his voice steady, no pleasantries needed. "Effective immediately." He opened a folder, laying out proposals bolded at the top Ezekiel Brooks' Skyward Initiative. The room stilled as he outlined mandatory anti-bias training for all 5,000 SkyPulse employees, a Tuskegee Airmen storytelling series for flight crews, and a STEM scholarship for underrepresented youth. And, he added, his gaze unshakable, "We're renaming the new lounge at Reagan National the Ezekiel Brooks Legacy Lounge." A VP, Ty loosened, leaned forward. "This about that Atlanta flight?" Keanu's eyes met his. "It's about a pattern. A 7-year-old girl and her mother almost lost their seats because of their name, their skin. Ezekiel Brooks never got the world's thanks for his courage. We're changing that." He slid a sketch across the table, a mural design of a red-tailed P-51 Mustang trailing a paper kite, its red and gold wings echoing the one Ava Carter had left on his seat. The idea for the scholarship had come from Nia Carter, the 36-year-old marketing executive whose resilience had anchored the flight's stand. Over a call the day after landing, Nia had pitched it, "Let's give kids like Ava a chance to fly, in classrooms, in cockpits." Keanu had nodded, her voice reigniting Ezekiel's legacy. "I'll fund the first $500,000, he said now, the boardroom silent but for a dropped pen. 3 weeks later, Reagan National Airport's Terminal B was transformed. A velvet banner hung over a sealed doorway, brass letters gleaming Ezekiel Brooks Legacy Lounge. Flight crews in crisp uniforms lined the corridor, standing at attention, their caps tucked under arms. Passengers paused, phones rising as whispers spread, "That's for a Tuskegee Airman." At the center stood Ezekiel Brooks, 92. His dark blue suit adorned with medals that caught the midday light streaming through the terminal's 50-foot windows. His oxygen tank hummed softly, its wheels steady beside his cane. But his posture, tall, proud, defied his years. To his left, Ava Carter, radiant in her red dress, a kite-shaped pin gleaming on her chest, held his hand. Her stuffed fox, Finn, peeked from her backpack, and her gold-beaded braids swayed as she looked up at the banner. Nia Carter stood beside them, her navy blazer sharp, her eyes glistening with a mix of pride and disbelief. This wasn't just a lounge. It was a monument to a man who'd flown through enemy skies and societal barriers. Keanu, in a simple gray jacket, stood at the corridor's end. No cameras, no fanfare. As Ezekiel approached, he waved off a handshake, pulling Keanu into a brief embrace. "You move fast, son," Ezekiel said, his voice raspy but strong. Keanu chuckled, his throat tight. Couldn't waste time. Nia caught Keanu's eye, her nod a silent thank you for amplifying her scholarship idea. The crowd, veterans, pilots, local leaders, gathered, their murmurs fading as Ava stepped forward, a pair of gold-handled scissors in her small hands. She glanced at Ezekiel, then at the crowd, her voice clear despite her nerves. "My great-grandpa flew so everyone could soar," she said, her words echoing her poem from the flight. "This place, it's for him, and for everybody who needs to be brave." The scissors trembled slightly as she cut the ribbon, and a wave of applause rose, not loud, but reverent. A standing ovation wrapped in awe. The mural behind the lounge doors gleamed. A red-tailed plane soaring, a paper kite trailing, tying Ezekiel's legacy to Ava's hope. Back in Atlanta, Ms. Elena Torres, the teacher who'd recorded the Flight 734 incident, stood in a community center gymnasium, organizing a school exhibit titled Wings of Valor. The walls were lined with black and white photos of Tuskegee Airmen, Ezekiel's medals, and Ava's poem, now framed Wings. Don't care who you are, they just fly. Students, teachers, and neighbors packed the room, their voices buzzing as they read Ava's words, shared on X under Dahmer Fly Fair, which had hit 1 million views. Local businesses, inspired by the hashtag's call for justice, pledged $100,000 to fund the Ezekiel Brooks Skyward Scholarship's first year, ensuring kids from Atlanta's South Side could study aerospace engineering or pilot training. Ms. Torres, her warm smile unwavering, guided a group of teens to a display of Ezekiel's flight log, her phone still buzzing with X notifications praising Ava's courage. Nia, standing near Ezekiel, felt the weight of the moment. Her proposal to Keanu had sparked this, a scholarship to lift kids like Ava, who'd faced the world's pushback at 7 but stood tall. She looked at her daughter, whose kite-shaped pin caught the light, and remembered Ezekiel's stories of flying 300 miles through flak to save a bomber crew. That fire lived in Ava, in her poem, in the mural's kite. Keanu, watching from the sidelines, tucked Ava's original paper kite into his jacket, its red and gold wings a reminder of his promise. He'd texted his assistant that morning, "Make sure the scholarship's funded for a decade." The D.C. skyline, visible through the terminal's windows, framed the Lincoln Memorial, a nod to the nation's history of struggle and hope, grounding this moment in America's ongoing fight for justice. As the crowd dispersed, a veteran in a Tuskegee Airman cap approached Ezekiel, saluting. "You brought us home, Captain," he said. Ezekiel nodded, his eyes on Ava. "She's carrying it now," he replied. The lounge doors opened, revealing a space of sleek wood and soft lighting, the mural dominating one wall, its kite soaring forever. Nia squeezed Ava's hand. "You did this, sweetheart," she whispered. Ava smiled, her kite pin gleaming. Great-grandpa did it first, she said, and in that moment, the sky felt bigger, ready for anyone brave enough to fly. The late summer air in Atlanta hung heavy, with the scent of magnolias and the distant hum of cicadas, a quiet rhythm that seemed to cradle the city's heartbeat. Inside the Harlem brownstone on Auburn Avenue, where Captain Ezekiel Brooks had lived for 60 of his 92 years, the stillness was profound. 3 weeks after the opening of the Ezekiel Brooks Legacy Lounge at Reagan National Airport, Ezekiel sat in his deep, leather armchair, his oxygen tank hissing softly beside him. His white hair, like silver smoke, caught the golden light filtering through gauzy curtains, and his hands, weathered but steady, rested on a lap blanket. On the nightstand beside him, Ava Carter's paper kite lay folded, its red and gold wings, a vibrant echo of the Tuskegee Airmen's red-tailed planes. Nia Carter sat nearby, sorting through a box of Ezekiel's wartime letters, her navy blazer draped over the couch, her eyes tracing words of courage written 80 years ago. Ava, now 7, knelt on the hardwood floor, her red dress pooling around her as she sketched a new kite, her stuffed fox, Finn, propped beside her. That evening, as the Atlanta skyline glowed 3 miles away, Ezekiel's breathing slowed, his eyes fluttering closed to the sound of Ava, reading aloud from a library book about pilots. He passed peacefully, a faint smile on his lips, the kite on his nightstand a silent witness. Nia found a letter tucked inside his Bible the next morning, written in his careful script, "Fly high, Ava. The sky's yours. Never let the ground hold you down." Ava, tears in her brown eyes, pinned the kite to her navy backpack, its gold beads glinting as she whispered to Finn, "I'm going to be a pilot, just like Great-Grandpa." Nia hugged her daughter, her own tears falling, feeling Ezekiel's fire alive in Ava's vow. A legacy not buried but soaring, carried forward by a 7-year-old's unbreakable spirit. 2 years later, in the spring of 2027, the National Museum of African American History and Culture in Washington, D.C., stood proud under a clear sky, its bronze lattice gleaming 1 mile from the Lincoln Memorial. Inside, Nia and Ava, now 9, walked through an exhibit titled "Wings of Freedom, the Tuskegee Airmen." Ava's red dress had been replaced by a navy jacket, her kite-shaped pin still gleaming on her chest. The exhibit hall was lined with black and white photos, flight logs, and medals. But one display drew a crowd, a glass case holding Ezekiel Brooks' pilot wings and Ava's original paper kite, its red and gold wings faded but radiant. Beside it, a screen played Ava's poem from Flight 734 Wings, "Don't care who you are, they just fly." The video, shared by Ms. Elena Torres on X with Thaunger Fly Fair, had reached 5 million views, inspiring a nationwide STEM camp for underrepresented youth, funded by the Ezekiel Brooks Skyward Scholarship. Ava stood beside a 16-year-old girl, Jada Ellis, the scholarship's first recipient, who held a newly earned pilot's license, her eyes bright with pride. Jada, whose grandfather had flown with Ezekiel, clutched a replica of the paper kite, a gift from Ava during their mentorship sessions in Atlanta. "You told me to keep going," Jada said, her voice soft. Ava, now taller, but still carrying Finn, smiled. "Great-Grandpa said the sky's for everybody." Nia, watching her daughter, felt a swell of pride. Her proposal to Keanu Reeves for the scholarship had sparked this moment, a testament to her agency and Ezekiel's legacy. The museum's marble floors echoed with footsteps, but for Nia, the sound was drowned by the memory of Ezekiel's letter, a call to rise above. Outside, at Ezekiel's gravesite in Atlanta's Westview Cemetery, Ava knelt on the grass, folding a new paper kite under a sprawling oak. The wind, warm and steady, lifted it skyward, its red and gold wings dancing against the Georgia sky. Nia stood beside her, the faded photo from Captain Ryan Ellis, Ezekiel and his father in 1945, tucked in her pocket. "Some wings don't land," Ava said, her voice steady, echoing her ribbon-cutting speech. "They carry us forever." The kite soared, a symbol of hope, courage, and a legacy that refused to fade, tying a family story to a nation's fight for justice. The lessons of this journey were etched deep. Courage isn't just standing up. It's choosing to act when silence feels safer, as Keanu did, inspired by Ezekiel's sacrifice. Legacy isn't just memory. It's action, like Nia's scholarship idea, ensuring kids like Jada could soar. And hope, as Ava showed, is a child's voice, small but mighty, shifting the world with a poem or a kite. These truths, born on a 700-mile flight, reminded us that change starts with one moment, one stand, one wing lifted against the wind. The Rainer Fly Fair movement, still alive on X, sparked STEM camps in 10 cities, from Chicago to Oakland, proving that stories of dignity ripple far beyond their origin. To you, our audience, thank you for joining us on this journey, for sharing Ava's poem, for retweeting Nash Fly Fair, for believing in quiet acts of courage. Your support keeps these stories aloft, inspiring others to rise. If this touched your heart, drop a 5 in the comments and tell us where you're watching from, Atlanta, DC, or beyond. We love seeing how far these wings fly. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more stories of kindness and legacy that remind us what it means to soar. Hit that button, join our community, and let's keep the sky open for everyone. As Ava's kite climbed higher, the Atlanta skyline faded into dusk, planes tracing paths overhead. Ezekiel's legacy, his flights, his stand, his love, lived in Ava's vow, Jada's license, and a nation's growing chorus for justice. The wind carried the kite, and with it, a truth some stories don't land. They live, they lift, they carry us forever.